I wasn't in a toxic relationship. He didn't hurt me, he didn't betray me, but I felt lonelier with him than I ever did alone. When I think back to the beginning, nothing stands out as wrong. That's the part people don't understand. They expect a clear warning sign, a moment where I should have known, but there wasn't one. There was no shouting, no cruelty, no betrayal I could point to and say, that's where it broke. In the beginning, it felt fine, not fireworks, not obsession, just steady, calm, predictable, the kind of love that looks healthy when you describe it to someone else. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered my birthday. He held my hand in public. He laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. When people asked how we were doing, I said, good. And I meant it. I didn't feel like I was settling. I felt like I was choosing peace. After relationships that burned too bright and collapsed too fast, this felt different, safer. There was no chaos to chase, no emotional roller coaster to survive, just two people building something quietly. At least that's what I told myself. I remember the way the early days felt ordinary in the best way. We didn't talk all night. We didn't share every secret right away. We took our time. He wasn't overly expressive, but I told myself that was just his personality. Not everyone wears their heart on their sleeve. Some people show love through consistency, not words. And he was consistent. He texted every morning, not long messages, just simple ones. Morning. Hope you have a good day. I didn't need paragraphs. I wasn't that kind of person. Or at least, I didn't think I was. When we were together, things felt easy. Comfortable silence, familiar routines. We watched the same shows, ordered the same food, sat on the same side of the couch. Nothing felt forced. Sometimes I noticed how quiet he could be, how his eyes drifted elsewhere when I talked too long, how his responses were short, even when my stories weren't. But I brushed it off. He's tired. He's not big on conversation. He just processes things internally. I told myself love doesn't have to be loud to be real, and I truly believe that. I wasn't asking for grand gestures. I didn't need surprises or dramatic declarations. I didn't need to be adored. I just wanted to feel included. At the time, I didn't even have the language for that. I didn't think of it as a need, just a preference. I liked when he asked about my day. I liked when he remembered small details. I liked when he looked at me like I mattered in the moment, not just in theory. But early on, those moments came just often enough to reassure me, enough to keep me relaxed. If he forgot to ask how I was feeling, I told myself not to read into it. If he changed the subject when I brought up something personal, I assumed he wasn't comfortable yet. We were still getting to know each other. I believe patience was love. I believe understanding was maturity. And I was proud of myself for not being too much. I had learned that lesson well. In past relationships, I'd been told I felt things too deeply, that I asked too many questions, that I needed too much reassurance. So this time, I promised myself I'd be different. I wouldn't overanalyze. I wouldn't demand emotional intensity. I wouldn't turn small things into big problems. This time, I would be easy to love. And in the beginning, that felt like growth. There were moments that felt warm, not intense, just steady. He'd put his arm around me without thinking, bring me coffee without being asked, send me a photo of something that reminded him of me. Small things, ordinary things, the kind of things people point to when they say, "See, he cares." And I agreed. When friends asked what I liked about him, I struggled to answer at first. Not because there was nothing, but because it was all so subtle. "He's calm," I said. "He's reliable. He doesn't play games." They nodded, approving. No one warned me that calm and emotionally distant can feel the same at first. I didn't notice how often I was the one filling the silence, how I adjusted my stories to keep his attention, how I shortened my thoughts when his eyes drifted away. Not consciously, it happened slowly, quietly. I still felt chosen. I still felt wanted. Or maybe I just felt present. And that was enough. For a while, there were evenings when we sat together, both on our phones, and I told myself this was normal. That real relationships aren't about constant connection. That comfort looks like not needing to talk. And maybe that's true. But there's a difference between peaceful silence and feeling invisible in the same room. I wasn't there yet, not emotionally. Back then, I still believed love didn't require much from me. Just patience, just flexibility, just understanding. I didn't know I was already adjusting the shape of myself to fit into the quiet. I remember one night in particular. Nothing dramatic happened. We were sitting side by side, watching something neither of us was really paying attention to. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He didn't pull away. He didn't lean in either. He just stayed still. At the time, that felt neutral, acceptable. I told myself, he's comfortable with me. I didn't notice how my chest felt slightly tight, how a part of me waited, not for words, just for acknowledgement, a squeeze of the hand, a glance, anything. It never came. But I didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. Nothing was wrong. That's what made it so confusing later. Because when nothing is wrong, you don't know what you're allowed to ask for. I didn't want to create problems where none existed. I didn't want to be ungrateful. So I stayed quiet. And in that quiet, I convinced myself that love was supposed to feel this way. Simple, uncomplicated, undemanding. I thought I was lucky. I didn't know yet that love can feel calm and still leave you slowly disappearing. I didn't know that needing to matter isn't asking for too much. Back then, I thought I was asking for nothing at all. And for a while, that felt like enough. If I'm honest, the change didn't arrive all at once. There was no moment where I woke up and thought, something is wrong. It was quieter than that, slower. It came in moments so small I barely noticed them at first. A pause that lasted a little too long. A question that didn't get answered. A feeling that rose in my chest and disappeared before I could name it. In the beginning, I told myself this was normal, that relationships settle, that excitement fades into routine. And routine isn't a bad thing. I didn't expect him to ask how I felt every day. I didn't need constant reassurance. I wasn't looking for intensity. I just wanted to feel seen. The first time I noticed it, it was something small. I asked him how his day was. He told me, in detail. I listened. I always did. Then I waited. The space opened up naturally, the way it does when it's your turn. But he didn't ask me back. Not because he was distracted, not because he was interrupted. He just moved on, started talking about something else, something trivial. I remember smiling and answering anyway, filling the gap myself. It was fine, I said. I didn't think much of it. People forget sometimes. But it happened again, and again. Each time I noticed the same small sensation, a quick drop in my chest. Not enough to hurt, just enough to register, like missing a step you didn't know was there. I told myself I was being sensitive, so I adjusted. I stopped waiting for the question. I volunteered my answers before there was space for silence. I learned how to insert myself into conversations without making it obvious, how to speak without sounding like I needed to be heard. I thought that was compromise. Sometimes when I shared something personal, his response came a little late, or it came short. Yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Not dismissive, just final. No follow-up, no curiosity. At first, I explained it away. He's not good with emotional stuff. He doesn't know what to say. He probably shows care differently. And I believe that, because I didn't want the alternative to be true. There were moments when I was clearly struggling, not dramatically, just quietly. A long day, a heavy thought, a tired kind of sadness. I didn't announce it. I didn't make it obvious. I just softened my voice, slowed my words, the kind of signals you send when you hope someone notices without you having to ask. He didn't. Or maybe he did, and didn't know what to do with it. Either way, the result was the same. The conversation stayed on the surface. The moment passed, and I carried the rest alone. I remember sitting next to him once, scrolling on my phone, feeling unusually distant from myself. I wanted to say something, not a complaint, just a thought. Something like, I feel a little off today. I opened my mouth, then I closed it, because I couldn't imagine what would come after. Not comfort, not questions, just that same polite listening, and then silence. So I stayed quiet. It felt easier. There's a strange thing that happens when your emotional needs aren't met in obvious ways. You don't get angry. You don't feel justified. You just feel embarrassed for having them at all. I started catching myself before I spoke. Is this necessary? Is this too much? Does this matter? I didn't want to turn every interaction into something heavy. I didn't want to be the reason things felt complicated, so I chose lightness. I laughed more. I changed subjects quickly. I kept things easy. And on the outside, it worked. We didn't fight. We didn't argue. There were no dramatic scenes. From the outside, we looked solid. Inside, something was slowly thinning out. It wasn't that he never showed care. He did, just not when I needed it most. He was attentive when things were practical, when something needed fixing, when there was a plan to make. But when it came to emotions, mine especially, there was a distance he never quite crossed. I noticed how conversations about him flowed easily. His stress, his frustrations, his thoughts. I held space for all of it. I asked questions. I remembered details. I followed up days later, not because I was keeping score, but because that's how I loved. I kept waiting for the moment when it would come back to me naturally. It didn't. I didn't confront him about it, because how do you explain something that feels so intangible? You can't say, "You didn't ask me how I felt enough," without sounding needy. You can't say, "I feel invisible sometimes," without feeling dramatic. So I stayed quiet, and each unanswered moment became easier to ignore. At least, that's what I told myself. But the body notices what the mind tries to minimize. I started feeling tired in conversations, like I was always leaning forward slightly, emotionally, always offering, always adjusting. I I didn't stop caring. I just started caring more carefully. There were nights when we lay next to each other, and I felt the urge to say something real, something honest, something like, "Do you really know me?" But the question scared me, because I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. So instead, I asked nothing. I focused on the good. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't dismissive on purpose. He wasn't unkind. That made it harder. Because when someone hurts you without trying to, you start wondering if the problem is you. Maybe I needed too much connection. Maybe my expectations were unrealistic. Maybe this was just how adult relationships worked. I told myself stories that made staying easier. I said things like, "He shows love in actions, not words. He's just wired differently. He'll open up with time." Time became my favorite excuse. Every unanswered moment was filed under eventually. Eventually, he'll ask. Eventually, he'll notice. Eventually, I won't feel this way anymore. But eventually never arrived. Instead, the moments kept stacking. Not enough to break me, just enough to change me. I noticed how my joy dulled slightly around him, how I shared my excitement with friends first, how I processed my sadness alone. It wasn't intentional. It just felt safer. I didn't want to feel that small drop in my chest again, that quiet disappointment. So I avoided the risk altogether. I became easier, quieter, less. And the strangest part was, he didn't seem to notice the difference. That hurt more than I expected. Because if you can disappear slowly in front of someone, it makes you wonder how present you ever were. I didn't resent him, not yet. I just felt this growing sense of being slightly out of sync. Like we were having two different relationships in the same space. His felt calm, mine felt cautious, and still, I stayed. Because nothing was wrong enough to leave, and everything was almost enough to stay. I didn't realize yet that love shouldn't require you to shrink in silence. I didn't know yet that these small, unanswered moments were teaching me something. Teaching me how to lower my voice, how to soften my needs, how to ask for less, without ever saying it out loud. At the time, I thought I was being patient. I thought I was being understanding. I didn't know I was already learning how to disappear. At some point, I stopped noticing the absence, not because it was gone, but because I had learned how to live around it. That's how it happens, I think. You don't wake up one day and decide to want less. You just begin to adjust, quietly, until the shape of your need fits the space you're given. I didn't say, "I need you to show up more." I didn't say, "I feel invisible sometimes." I did something much subtler. I lowered the bar. At first, it felt like maturity. I told myself I was learning how to be realistic. That love isn't about constant emotional engagement, that people have limits. So I made mine smaller. I stopped expecting him to notice when my tone changed. I stopped hoping he'd ask follow-up questions. I stopped pausing after his stories, waiting for mine to matter too. I learned to keep things short. "How was your day?" "Fine." Not because it was true, but because it was easier. I told myself I didn't want to burden him, that my feelings weren't urgent, that I could handle them on my own, and for a while, I could. There's a strange sense of control that comes with asking for less. When you don't hope, you don't feel disappointed. When you don't ask, you can't be ignored. So I stopped asking. I didn't bring up things that made me feel small, I didn't mention the moments I replayed in my head. I didn't share the thoughts that lingered long after our conversations ended. I filtered myself. Not completely, just enough. Enough to stay comfortable. Enough to keep the peace. I told myself I was being low maintenance. Easy, understanding. I thought this was what healthy love looked like. I didn't realize I was training myself not to need. When something good happened to me, I hesitated before sharing it. Not because he wouldn't care, but because I wasn't sure how much space I was allowed to take up. So I softened my excitement. I trimmed the details. I kept my joy small. When something hurt, I swallowed it, told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I was being sensitive again. I became very good at talking myself out of my own feelings. I stopped checking my phone for his messages, not because I didn't want them, but because I didn't want to feel that small drop in my chest when they didn't come. I told myself this was independence. I told myself I was strong. But strength shouldn't feel like slowly erasing yourself. I remember the moment I realized how far I'd gone. We were talking about something important to him, something that had been weighing on him for days. I listened, asked questions, stayed present. At one point, I felt a familiar urge rise in my chest, the need to share something of my own, not to shift the focus, just to connect. I opened my mouth, then I stopped, because I didn't want to interrupt his momentum, because I didn't want to derail the conversation, because I didn't want to ask him to hold space for me the way I held it for him. So I stayed quiet. Later that night, alone, I realized something that scared me. I hadn't even considered that my feelings deserved room too. That thought hadn't crossed my mind at all. That's when I knew I'd lowered the bar too far. But instead of raising it, I told myself it was fine. I said, this is just how we are. I said, not every relationship needs emotional depth. I said, I'm overthinking. I became my own silencer. Whenever a thought came up, I wish he'd ask about me, I shut it down before it finished forming. Whenever I felt that familiar ache, the one that whispered, you're alone in this, I told myself to be grateful. Because he wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfaithful. He wasn't dismissive in obvious ways. And that made everything harder. Because when the harm is quiet, you start questioning whether it exists at all. I started comparing my relationship to worse ones, to louder ones, to ones filled with chaos and pain. At least he doesn't yell. At least he doesn't lie. At least he's here. I used at least like a shield. Every time I felt something missing, I countered it with something he did right. I convinced myself that wanting more meant being ungrateful, that asking for presents meant asking for too much. So I adjusted again. I stopped initiating conversations about feelings. I stopped mentioning things that mattered to me unless they were easy to digest. I stopped reaching for emotional closeness, not consciously. It happened the way habits form, slowly, through repetition, and he didn't notice. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that he didn't give me more, but that he didn't notice I was giving less. I laughed a little quieter, shared a little less, pulled back just enough to protect myself, and the relationship stayed the same. That's when it hit me. If I can disappear this easily, how much space was I ever taking up to begin with? I didn't bring it up. I didn't sit him down and explain how I felt. I didn't ask for change, because by then, I wasn't even sure what I was allowed to ask for. I had lived with less for so long, it felt normal. I told myself love doesn't need constant validation. That emotional connection is overrated. That independence is attractive. I wrapped my loneliness in language that made it sound intentional. But loneliness doesn't disappear just because you rename it. It settles into your body. It shows up in the way you hesitate before speaking, in the way you brace yourself for indifference. I stopped imagining a future where I felt fully seen, not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't believe it was realistic. I lowered my expectations until they fit exactly where I was. And that scared me because I realized something then. I wasn't staying because I was happy. I was staying because I'd learned how not to want. I wasn't asking for much. I wasn't asking for reassurance. I wasn't asking for constant attention. I wasn't asking for him to change who he was. I was asking to matter. And instead of saying that out loud, I convinced myself it was optional. I made peace with crumbs because they were familiar, because they were better than nothing, because wanting the whole thing felt risky. I didn't feel angry. I felt tired of translating my needs into silence, tired of carrying the emotional weight alone, tired of pretending this was enough, but I stayed. Because when you've lowered the bar long enough, you forget it was ever higher. You forget what it felt like to be met, to be asked, to be held emotionally without having to explain yourself. You forget that love can feel mutual. I didn't know yet that this wasn't sustainable. I didn't know yet that something would eventually break. All I knew was that I had become someone who asked for very little, and even that felt like too much. The moment didn't come during a fight. That's what surprises me now. It didn't arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. There was no breaking point anyone else would recognize. It came quietly, on an ordinary day, in the middle of a moment that should have felt safe. We were sitting together like we always did. Same place, same routine, same comfortable distance between us. Nothing was wrong, and somehow, that's what made it impossible to ignore. I remember watching him talk, not really listening, just watching, the way his face stayed relaxed, the way his tone never changed, the way everything felt settled. He wasn't unhappy. He wasn't distant in a dramatic way. He was exactly where he wanted to be. And suddenly, I realized something that stopped me cold. I wasn't. The thought came fully formed, without emotion at first. This is it. Not this moment exactly, but this feeling, this quiet absence, this sense of being present but not held, this low-level loneliness that had become my background noise. This was the relationship. And it wasn't changing. I felt it in my body before my mind caught up. A heaviness in my chest, not sharp, just undeniable. I didn't panic. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. That clarity scared me more than pain ever had. Because pain can be argued with, explained away, distracted from. Clarity just sits there, unmovable. I thought back to all the moments I'd minimized, the times I'd softened my voice, the questions I never asked, the feelings I edited before they left my mouth. I saw them all at once, not as isolated incidents, but as a pattern. And for the first time, I stopped defending it. I stopped saying he didn't mean to. I stopped saying this is just his way. I stopped saying maybe I'm too sensitive, not out of anger, out of honesty. I wasn't asking for something unreasonable. I wasn't asking him to be someone else. I was asking to be noticed, and I wasn't. That truth settled in quietly, like a final piece clicking into place. I looked at him and realized something else. He didn't know this was happening. Not because he didn't care, but because I had made sure he never had to notice. I had lowered the bar so gently, he didn't even feel it drop. That realization hurt in a way I hadn't expected, because it meant I couldn't blame him completely. And it meant I couldn't keep blaming myself either. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mismatch that silence had been hiding. I didn't say anything in that moment. I didn't need to. The need to explain myself, to justify why I felt the way I did, was gone. I finally understood that clarity doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need validation. It just is. Later that night, lying next to him, I felt the distance more clearly than ever. Not physical distance, emotional. Like we were facing different directions, even while sharing the same space. I realized then that I had been lonely for a long time. Not alone. Lonely. There's a difference. Being alone is something you notice immediately. Loneliness creeps in so slowly, you don't realize it's there until it's everywhere. I had been carrying that loneliness quietly, thinking it was temporary, thinking it was something I could outgrow. But loneliness doesn't disappear just because you endure it long enough. It deepens. I thought about the future, not in dramatic terms, just small ones, holidays, evenings, conversations that never quite went anywhere. I imagined myself continuing to lower the bar, continuing to need less, continuing to disappear. And for the first time, that future scared me more than leaving ever could. I didn't want to wake up years later and realize I had lived half a life inside my own relationship. I didn't want to keep calling this love just because it was familiar. I didn't want to keep surviving something that was supposed to nourish me. Still, I didn't confront him. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something important. Explaining this would require me to make my needs visible again. And I wasn't sure he could meet them, even if he wanted to. That wasn't an accusation. It was a recognition. Some people don't withhold presence out of cruelty. They simply don't have it to give in the way you need, and no amount of patience can turn absence into intimacy. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, not spiraling, not crying, just thinking. I thought about who I had become in this relationship, how careful I was, how contained, how small. I realized I missed myself, the version of me who spoke without rehearsing, who shared joy without measuring it, who trusted that her feelings had a place to land. I hadn't lost her suddenly. I had placed her aside, piece by piece, and now I finally saw what it had cost me. The clarity didn't demand action right away. It didn't say, leave now. It didn't say, fight for this. It simply asked one question. Is this enough for you? Not should it be enough, not could it work, but is it? And for the first time, I didn't rush to answer. I didn't argue with myself. I didn't bargain. I just listened. And the answer came softly, but firmly. No. That answer didn't come with anger. It came with grief. Grief for the time I spent convincing myself this was all I deserved. Grief for the version of love I had hoped would eventually appear. But there was something else underneath it, relief. Because once you see the truth, you can stop negotiating with it. I didn't stop caring about him in that moment. I didn't stop loving him, But I stopped pretending that love was enough on its own. Love without presence is just an idea. And I was tired of living inside an idea of a relationship. I realized then that I had been asking the wrong question all along. Not, why doesn't he show up for me? But why have I been okay with not being met? That question didn't come with judgment. It came with understanding. I had learned to survive silence because I was afraid of asking for more, afraid of being told my needs were too much. But now I saw the truth. Needing to matter isn't excessive, it's foundational, and no relationship should require you to disappear in order to keep it. I didn't make any decisions that night, but something fundamental shifted. The way I saw us, the way I saw myself. The fog had lifted, and even though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. I could no longer unsee what I had been living inside. I could no longer call this enough. And for the first time in a long while, that clarity felt like the beginning of something, not the end. The truth didn't arrive with confidence. It didn't sound like empowerment. It didn't feel like relief right away. It arrived quietly, the way real truths often do, without urgency, without drama, without asking to be announced. It simply settled in. After that moment of clarity, nothing around me changed immediately. We still talked the same way, still shared the same routines, still existed side by side in a relationship that looked exactly like it had the day before. But something inside me had shifted, and once something shifts, it never quite goes back. I noticed how I listened differently now. Not with hope, not with anticipation, but with awareness. I stopped waiting for him to surprise me, stopped interpreting silence as something temporary, stopped imagining conversations that might one day happen. I wasn't disappointed anymore. I was present. And presence, I learned, can be more confronting than pain. I saw him clearly, not as a villain, not as a failure, just as a person who loved in a way that didn't reach me. There was sadness in that realization, but there was also honesty. I didn't feel the need to convince myself anymore. I didn't say, maybe he'll change. I didn't say, maybe I'm asking too much. I simply observed what was, and what was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not the kind that feels grounding, the kind that slowly asks you to shrink so it can stay intact. I realized then that love doesn't have to hurt to be wrong for you. It can feel gentle, it can feel familiar, it can even feel safe, and still not be enough. That understanding didn't make me brave overnight. It didn't make decisions easier. But it softened the way I spoke to myself. For the first time in a long while, I stopped arguing with my own needs. I didn't tell myself to be grateful for what I had. I didn't remind myself that others had it worse. I didn't minimize my loneliness just because it didn't scream. I let it exist. And in doing so, I realized something important. I wasn't asking for much. I never was. I wasn't asking to be adored. I wasn't asking to be prioritized above everything else. I wasn't asking for someone to lose themselves for me. I was asking to be considered, to be asked how I felt, and to have that question mean something, to be noticed when I grew quiet, to feel like my presence mattered beyond convenience. That isn't excessive, that's the baseline. And the fact that I had spent so long convincing myself otherwise, that was the real heartbreak. I thought about how easily I had adapted, how quickly I learned to survive on less. not because I didn't know what I deserved, but because I was afraid of what wanting more might cost me. Wanting more risks rejection, wanting more risks being alone. So I chose the quieter pain, the familiar one. But familiarity doesn't make something right. It just makes it easier to stay. I didn't suddenly stop loving him. That's not how it works. Care doesn't disappear just because clarity arrives. But love, I realized, isn't just about what you feel. It's about what you're allowed to be. And in this relationship, I wasn't allowed to be fully myself. Not because he forbade it, but because there was no room for it to land. That distinction mattered. It meant I didn't need to hate him to leave. I didn't need to prove harm. I didn't need a dramatic reason that would make sense to everyone else. I just needed to listen to the quiet truth I had been ignoring. That this wasn't nourishing me. That this wasn't growing me. That this wasn't where I could stay without slowly disappearing. I stopped framing my needs as flaws. I stopped calling my desire for connection too much. I began to see it as information, a signal, not something to suppress, but something to respond to. That didn't make the next steps obvious. It didn't answer every question, but it changed the tone of the conversation I had with myself. Instead of asking, how do I make this work? I started asking, what do I need to feel alive here? And the answer didn't come in words. It came in a feeling, a quiet knowing that I had been bending for too long, that I had made myself smaller, not because I was flexible, but because I was afraid that asking to matter would be too much, afraid that being fully seen would cost me the relationship. But love that requires you to disappear isn't love that sustains. It's love that erodes, slowly, silently, until you forget what it felt like to be whole. I didn't leave that day. I didn't make a speech. I didn't announce a transformation. But I stopped betraying myself in small ways. I stopped pretending silence felt like peace. I stopped calling absence space. I stopped telling myself that this was the best I could hope for. That alone changed everything. Because when you stop negotiating your worth, you start noticing what you can no longer accept. I began to feel a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for what I had hoped this would become. Relief that I no longer had to convince myself. I realized that wanting to matter isn't dramatic. It's human. And love that makes you question whether you're allowed to want that is love that needs to be questioned. I don't tell this story to assign blame. I tell it because so many people live inside relationships like this. Quiet ones, polite ones. Relationships where nothing is wrong enough to leave, but nothing is right enough to stay. Where you're not unhappy, just slowly absent. If this story feels familiar, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you're paying attention. And attention is where change begins. The soft truth is this: you don't need to justify your need to matter. You don't need to earn present. You don't need to disappear to be loved. Love should meet you where you are, not ask you to become smaller to keep it comfortable. I wasn't asking for much. I was asking for something essential, and learning that, truly learning it, was the beginning of choosing myself again. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. And that, finally, felt like enough.